Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to be discussing The Crusades by Thomas Asbridge and why you should read it if you haven't already. This book was released in 2010. It runs approximately 784 pages long. This copy that I have is 681 pages, however, so it is a long work, but it's an absolutely exhilarating ride. I can't wait to talk about it with you guys today. Before I get into the summary of the book, my thoughts on it, and some additional reading, I want to provide you guys with a brief paragraph about the man himself, Thomas Asbridge, who wrote the book. Thomas Asbridge is a distinguished medieval historian specializing in the Crusades and the broader history of relations between Islam and the West. He earned his BA in Ancient and Medieval History from Cardiff University, followed by a PhD in Medieval History from Royal Holloway University of London. Since 1999, Asbridge has been a faculty member of Queen Mary University of London, where he serves as a reader in medieval history. Beyond his publications, he has contributed to public history through documentaries, including a BBC series on the Crusades, which we'll talk about in a minute here, and a feature on William Marshall. So that gives you guys a little bit of background information on Thomas Asbridge, the man himself. He also wrote a couple other books that I highly recommend, the first of which being The Creation of the Principality of Antioch, which was released in 2000. In 2004, he released The First Crusade, A New History. Highly recommend that one as well. And he also has a book titled The Greatest Knight, The Remarkable Life of William Marshall, The Power Behind 5 English Thrones. So I haven't read that one myself, but I'm going to get around to it because I really like the way Thomas Asbridge writes history. Now, I'm going to get into a quick synopsis of what the book itself covers, and then we'll talk about why I personally think you should read it, and I'll give you guys some additional literature to go with it, and I'll give you guys a couple films and documentaries that I think pair well with reading about the Crusades. So, for the summary, The Crusades, the authoritative history of the war for the Holy Land, masterfully chronicles the 2-century-long clash between Christianity and Islam over the sacred territories of the Middle East. This compelling narrative unveils the fervent motivations, legendary figures, and pivotal battles that defined the era, all while presenting perspectives from both Christian and Muslim viewpoints. Asbridge's vivid storytelling transports readers into the heart of medieval warfare, diplomacy, and faith, offering a profound understanding of how these epic conflicts indelibly shaped our modern world. So, that should give you guys a better understanding of what exactly this book covers. It's very difficult to cover the entire history of the Crusades in just one book. However, I think Asbridge has done the best job at that, at least for the layman reader. It's a 200-year history, and there were multiple Crusades, some of which were bigger than others, some of which were more important than others, and it also depends on which side you're on when you're depending the importance of one versus another Crusade. But one thing that I will say is Asbridge brings the Crusades to life. He electrifies them. It's an incredibly thrilling book to read compared to some of the other books that I've read about the Crusades. So if you're somebody who's never read about the Crusades before, you're looking for one book to read on the topic, I would read this book. Now, if you want further literature, I'm going to provide you guys with some suggested books here in a second. But as I said, if you guys want just one book to cover the Crusades and you never plan on reading another book on the Crusades in your life, this would probably be the one I would give you because of its accessibility, how exciting it is, and how much it covers. It covers the entire history as well as you can. So here are a couple additional books that I would read with that if you're even more interested in learning about the Crusades. You want to go even further. The next book that I would read is probably God's War, A New History of the Crusades by Christopher Tyerman. Christopher Tyerman, I hope I'm saying his last name right there, but he is one of the most highly regarded authors when it comes to writing about the Crusades. The next book that I would recommend is The Crusades, Islamic Perspectives by Carol Hildebrand. It's very important to read both sides whenever you're reading about history. Does not matter the time period, but especially the Crusades. We have lots of sources. We have lots of Muslim sources and we have lots of Christian sources, and you can't just read Christian sources. Anybody who writes a good book on the Crusades has to read from both sources. So if you read a book that covers a little bit more of the Christian source or of a little bit more of the Muslim sources, that's probably a good thing because a lot of the books written on the Crusades are in English and a lot of them are a little bit biased towards the Christian perspective. So that's just why I would suggest suggest that one. Another one is The Crusades, A History by John Riley Smith. He is also a very highly regarded historian when it comes to the Crusades. There's another one, I believe it's Steve Runciman. I believe he also has a trilogy on the Crusades. I believe that's who it was. Yeah, it was Steve Runciman. So he has a great trilogy on the Crusades as well. I also recommend those. They are a little bit biased towards the Byzantine perspective, I will say that. So just know that going into it. But he has written a brilliant trilogy on the Crusades that's also highly engaging. However, it's been criticized a little bit for being dated, and like I said, a little bit biased towards the Byzantine perspective. Next, I want to provide you guys with a list of films that I think would go beautifully with reading about the Crusades. The first of which is a film that I'm sure a lot of you guys have already seen. It's, of course, Kingdom of Heaven from 2005, directed by Ridley Scott. This epic depicts the struggle of Jerusalem during the time of the Crusades, focusing on the character of Baldwin of Ibelin and his moral dilemmas amidst the war. So Baldwin IV, many of you guys know him from the movie with the mask. He's a very interesting king to read about. He's right up there with Richard the Lionheart. I think he has one of the most interesting stories when it comes to the Crusades, and I think Ridley Scott did a fantastic job at crafting a film that depicts the Crusades. Now, they get a lot of stuff right, but they also get a lot of stuff wrong. Ridley Scott is very familiar to making historical films, obviously the films like Napoleon, but you're never going to get a historical film or a history film that is 100% accurate. It's absolutely impossible to make a film like that. You're always going to get something wrong. Something's going to be left in that wasn't from the time period. That's always going to happen. So when people kind of criticize historical films for not getting things accurate, for me, it's a little bit tedious and it's excessive. Like, if I were to do that with everything that I'm an expert in, I'm not really an expert in anything, but if I were to watch, like, let's say a martial arts film and I were to criticize every little technique, I would never enjoy a John Wick movie or Jason Bourne movie. And I do enjoy those films because they're good films, but I can't just criticize every little thing and nitpick everything. So I do the same thing with historical films. I don't nitpick every little thing that they get wrong, even though I notice it. I tend to just try to let that go and try to enjoy the film. And Kingdom of Heaven is a fantastic film. It's beautiful, and I highly recommend you watch the director's cut. The theatrical version cuts out a lot of stuff that is crucial to the story and helps fill it out. And I think the theatrical version was a little bit panned when it first came out. Didn't do well at the box office. People didn't really like it. It wasn't critically acclaimed. When the director's cut came out, people almost unanimously agreed that this is the version. This is what the film should have been. Now, there is a 4-hour version of Napoleon out there, which I think actually might be a terrific film, but right now we only have the theatrical version of Napoleon, so sometimes that happens. Sometimes a director goes out there with a vision, they shoot something really big, and the studio forces them to cut it down, making it not a perfect product when what they had originally was a near perfect film, which I think Kingdom of Heaven is. I think it's a fantastic film. So I recommend that one. Talked about it quite a bit there, even though I think most people have probably already seen it. The second film that I'll recommend is El Cid from 1961. This historical drama chronicles the life of the Spanish hero Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, who fought both Christians and Moors in medieval Spain. So not exactly directly related to the Crusades, but a Crusades era film that I think is a fun watch for anybody who hasn't seen it. El Cid is a highly regarded film, but very, very underrated. Not many people have seen it, so I highly recommend checking that one out. The third film that I'll mention today is The Lion in Winter from 1968. This film explores the political and personal dynamics of King Henry II and his family, providing a nuanced portrayal of the period leading up to the Crusades. So again, highly recommend this film. The Lion in Winter is one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen in my life. Extremely, extremely underrated. I think it's maybe not on the level of Gone with the Wind, but it's up there. It's like close. It's one of those sprawling epics that's just moving, and I don't know. I think it's an incredibly underrated film. The fourth film that I'll mention today is The Seventh Seal from 1957. This philosophical masterpiece follows a knight returning from the Crusades, engaging in a symbolic chess match with death during the plague years. So the Seventh Seal I put here because it's related to the Crusades and it's following a Crusader knight, but it is more of a philosophical film. I'm a huge Ingmar Bergman fan. I champion him as one of the greatest directors of all time, and I just think that his films are so underrated. Not enough people watch them. And The Seventh Seal, despite being a black and white film in Swedish from the 1950s, is actually highly watchable. There's a lot of interesting dialogue in that film, and I highly recommend it to anybody who's interested in philosophy, chess, or knights and the Crusades. So the fifth film that I'll mention today is Arn, the Knight Templar from 2007. This Swedish film tells the story of Arn Magnusson, a nobleman turned Knights Templar, highlighting themes of loyalty, love, and duty during the Crusades. This film I watched a long time ago, but I absolutely loved it. There are a ton of films on the Crusades out there. These are not the only 5, but these are just the 5 that I think are the best and the ones that I would recommend today. Otherwise, I can make this video too damn long if I were to talk about every single Crusade movie that's out there. And it's the same when it comes to documentaries. So I'll only list 4 documentaries today. However, there are many, many fantastic documentaries out there about the Crusades. The one that I like the most is The Crusades from 2011. This BBC documentary series was written and presented by Thomas Asbridge, the writer of this book that we're talking about, exploring the historical, cultural, and religious aspects of the Crusades from both Christian and Muslim perspectives. So I highly recommend that. If there's one piece of media that I would pair with this book today, it's this documentary, because it was also created and written by the man who wrote this book. So I highly recommend watching both. I think you can find this documentary series on YouTube. If not, it might be on Internet Archive. I'm not exactly sure where to find it, but I'm sure you guys are resourceful and you guys will find a way to watch it. So the second documentary that I would recommend is from 2005. It's called The Crescent and the Cross, a History Channel documentary that delves into major conflicts, figures, and battles of the Crusades, featuring expert commentary and vivid reenactments. So the History Channel, I'm sure you guys know if you guys clicked on this video, is like one of the greatest channels, if not the greatest channel for putting out documentaries on historical time periods. So the Crusades, they've put out many great documentaries about the Crusades. I think this one, The Crescent and the Cross from 2005, is probably the best one that they produced, but there are other ones that are out there, and the list is long. The amount of honorable mentions I would have had for documentaries about the Crusades today would have been quite long. So I'll wrap up with these next 2. The next one is The Fall of Jerusalem from 2006. This documentary focuses on the First Crusade and the climactic siege of Jerusalem in 1099, shedding light on the motivations and consequences of the campaign. So for me, the most interesting crusade to read about is the First Crusade. Maybe that's because I'm a Christian and that's the one that we actually won, but I find it to be the most interesting because it was in a way the most impactful one. I know the Muslims kind of took Jerusalem back in the following Crusades, but the first one was a huge moment in European history, and to me, it's the most interesting one to read about. So I highly recommend this documentary from 2006, The Fall of Jerusalem. Lastly, we'll talk about Ancient Warriors, Knights Templar from 1998. This documentary explores the origins, rise, and fall of the Knights Templar, a key military order during the Crusades, along with their lasting mystique in popular culture. So the Knights Templar is obviously a kind of subsection of Crusade history that you're going to want to study. There are some fantastic books about the Templars out there. I unfortunately didn't mention any of them today, but eventually I'll make a why you should read video for some of those books that I enjoy. So today, I think that's all that I have for you guys. I gave you guys about 4 documentaries there, about 5 films, maybe 3 or 4 books that you can read alongside Thomas Asbridge's The Crusades. But definitely read this book. Definitely start with this. Go out, pick it up. It's pretty cheap. It was $30 Canadian, which is definitely worth it for a 700-page book that's this well written about the Crusades. And if you're interested in the subject, I'm sure you'll find it at a library or go buy it yourself. But yeah, a fantastic book. I can't recommend it enough. I highly recommend you guys go read it. If you do read this book, definitely come back to this video and let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of it. I love chatting with you guys about books, and if you guys like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends to help boost this channel in the algorithm. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, it means the world to me. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.